In the previous video, we were attempting to repair a Snell & Wilcox standards converter. Now that has gone on hold for a little bit because I'm presently waiting for some components to arrive. Now as soon as those show up, we'll get straight back to it, however that turns out. But today, the PM5644. Again, I hear you say? Yes, again. Now we are coming up to 2 years since my first rather dreadful video about this product. Now there were a number of things that I didn't like about that video. First of all, in the introduction, an unfortunate slip of the tongue. I managed to describe it as being infamous when I actually meant to say famous, and I don't know how I missed that in the proofing. Then we spent about 15 minutes talking about this likely Spanish-designed test card, which, despite having nothing to do with Philips, has become ubiquitous in its association with the product, thanks to fantasists who lurk in obscure corners of the internet. Now, I'm not going to argue that this channel isn't one of those corners, but I do like to stick to the facts, and that brings me to the other thing that I didn't like about that video, is that a lot of what I said was coming from rather sketchy sources, and there certainly was a good bit of speculation thrown in there as well. And it's not a comfortable feeling to put your face on a presentation like that. Back when I first started researching this thing, about 5 years ago now, if you punched the term into Google, you would have been spammed with images of this, which was no help whatsoever. At the time, I couldn't really find any credible information about this product on the internet whatsoever. So in search of answers, I just bought one that happened to be for sale at the time. And when this thing landed on my doorstep, I thought I had it. I thought I was going to learn everything. But what actually turned up has felt like more of an April Fool's joke than something that I was going to learn anything from. And yeah, just in case you're wondering, this particular unit here, yeah, doesn't actually do anything else, and probably somebody paid 10,000 bucks for that. And that was the beginning of a realization that there was more to this product than anybody knew at the time, and unraveling it all was going to be a massive job. It was going to take a long time. And as it's turned out, it's also becoming an international effort. So today is going to be another installment in the unraveling of the many mysteries of this product. Now the main subject of today's video, and the thing that I was actually proud of about the first video, is going to be this thing here. Now this is the logo generator, or PM8546, as it is referred to in the Philips catalog. Now just a quick recap of what this thing actually does. This can insert either a text or a graphical logo into either of the black boxes in the Philips pattern, and it's also able to insert a clock and, for the first time ever, the date into the Philips pattern. Now I did talk a bit about that in video number 15, where we looked at the previous generator, the 5534, which only had the clock. So yeah, this one was the first one that had the date. And the PM8546 can be seen beavering away in the background of a whole multitude of other test cards, but I'm not going to get into that today. We're just going to be focusing on the Philips pattern. Now, for those people who managed to get to the second half of the first video, and there was only a minority, you'll recall that I went to considerable lengths to create a basically reproduction of this thing. And this one here is a clone of the original, same hardware, but you'll recall that it's using software that I basically wrote myself. The reason that I went to such lengths to try to recreate this thing, first of all, was because I just thought it would be an interesting project, and it was a very difficult project. It went on for probably a good few months. Secondly, I wanted to just show you guys at least something in that video, and thirdly, I thought it would be just a nice, neat thing to have on the channel, and certainly a number of my 5644 units have these reproduction logo generators in them, and we've seen them ticking away in the background in various videos. It's just nice to have. But ever since I did that, of course, I've been really curious to know what that original code was like. If only I could get my hands on that original firmware from these things and just see how it actually differs from my recreation. Now just a quick recap, and I apologize to regular viewers because I've talked about this a number of times before. Finding an original sample of the logo generator is a punishingly difficult thing to do, and the reason for this is because of how the second-hand market for this sort of equipment works. The logo generator is generally only fitted in units which were used in television broadcast, because if you're going to be transmitting a test card, you really need to be having some station ID in there so people know what it actually is. Whereas for a lab unit, you probably wouldn't waste the extra few $1,000s on it, because the thing is just sitting on your desk. You know what the source is. Now, when the analog switch-off happened, the value of second-hand analog equipment was effectively zeroed. So broadcasters, rather than trying to sell it, they would just call in any old e-waste company. And I think you can guess what happened next. So yeah, that's been pretty frustrating. Now, since the first video, The number of known surviving samples of this equipment has doubled from 10 to roughly 20, but each person that got in touch with me, and by the way, I'm always wanting to hear from people who have samples of these things, they all told me the same thing, which is that they have a SKU which I've already dumped and no logo generator, which has just been really frustrating because these units are just coming out of lab clearouts where there's lots of companies dealing in this equipment and they'll just sell anything that lands on their doorstep, unlike television broadcasters, unfortunately. In the first video, I showed you a picture of a surviving sample of the logo generator that I was aware of. Now that particular unit was removed from the Loewe TV factory in Germany, I think around about 2017, 2018, and ended up on eBay. It did actually have the logo generator in it because that factory was a massive facility. They had a lot of sources, so it was actually necessary for them to have the source ID option in there. Now, unfortunately, the person who ended up buying that off eBay completely refused to give any kind of access to it, whether it be to dump the code out of it, whether it be to just give it a demo, or even a description of it. I got nothing out of them, which was really frustrating. All I could do was just look at the picture of it. So whether or not we would ever see the logo generator running rested on whether or not anybody else had a sample of it. But even if somebody else did have a sample of it, there was a number of logistical difficulties in actually getting it dumped. And the EEPROM chips on this board are easy enough to dump. They can be done with any old $50 programmer. But the PAL chips on it, now unfortunately these things can only be read out by a high-end, typically $1,000+ programmer, which very few people have. So to have a surviving logo generator in possession of someone who's actually prepared to dump it and who actually has the equipment to dump it, that seemed like that was a very unlikely thing to happen. And that's why I originally offered to travel if anybody had a sample of it, within reason. I don't think I'd be flying to the other side of the world. Recently I was contacted by a chap by the name of William who lives in France, who's only just come across the channel, and you can find his contact details on my website. Now what he's told me is that he has not one but two samples of the logo generator, and specifically he has widescreen versions of it, which is pretty unexpected because, as I said before, the widescreen versions of this are pretty uncommon, so to find one with a logo generator in it, yeah, that was unexpected. Not only that, he's also said he's willing to dump it, and he even has the equipment to dump it, and he just did it. So now I have the widescreen firmware, and I don't even have to get off my chair, which is absolutely amazing. Now, unfortunately, that first picture that we showed you of is a 4x3 unit. It has different firmware. There's going to be some differences. But I think with the firmware that we do have, we can actually finally get a pretty good idea of how this thing works. I think fundamentally it's going to be the same, probably just a few little things. And if anybody does actually have a 4x3 logo generator that you are prepared to dump, of course get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. But anyway, let's go and program the code from William into one of my clone logo generators and have a look at this thing and see how it works. So this is our test setup. Now we have the 16:9 generator with our clone logo generator all programmed with my recreation of the software at the moment. And over here we've got all of the chips from the original software all programmed up and ready to go. Now, in terms of the actual setup here, we've got two outputs, one for the capture card so you can see what I'm doing, one for the TV so I can see what I'm doing, and we've also got the GPIB inputs hooked up here because I think we're probably going to need this a bit later on because we can't necessarily do everything from the front panel. And side note here, this GPIB interface, this is another clone that I built. I might talk a bit about that later on. Now you'll notice that two of the chips here are not labeled, and this is because I don't think there are going to be any use in this particular SKU. Because unfortunately we have a sticky wicket here. Now this is a page from the manual of the 4x3 generator. This is from chapter 3, which this turned up recently. It was scanned once upon a time, but unfortunately only that chapter was scanned. We still don't have the rest of the manual. Now if you have it, of course get in touch with me. There's a growing list of people that would like to see that. Now in here we've got a number of logo generator SKUs listed. The widescreen generator we have here is not on this list because this is just for 4x3 units, so clearly there's another manual which we also don't have any of. Now specifically the problem here is that our logo generator firmware is the component version, not this specific one, but something similar, whereas we need the composite version for this particular generator. Now while I've got this page up, we do actually have an interesting listing of all the 4x3 options, well, certainly that existed when this was printed. If it's got a cross by it, that means I don't think there's any surviving samples of it. Notably absent on this list is the mysterious Indian head generator, not appearing on here. Now, I don't know what that means. Does it have its own manual? Was it some kind of prank, or was it a custom unit? I don't know. So coming back to the problem with this being a component version. So these two PALs here are the ones which are different for a component version. They sit between the character PROMs and the DACs. Now what they do, superficially, it's fairly obvious. But when I was trying to put together the recreation, I had an awful lot of trouble trying to work out how to actually write the code for these. Like, what are they supposed to do? What's the actual spec for them? So I ended up asking around on various forums, and eventually it was suggested to me that I have a look at the venerable Specky, speaking of specs. And that was what cracked it, the realization that this thing has an 8-color palette. And looking at the spectrum actually gave me an example of how to actually implement what's inside of these. So that's what these ones are at the moment. These are the ZX Spectrum color palette. And this actually raised another question about the original code. What is the original color palette? Because you can actually reprogram these PALs and have a different 8 colors to what's used in the Spectrum. So I wonder if that might be a possibility. I don't actually know. And I'm not sure if we're necessarily going to find out at the time being, because, as I say, these are component versions. I'm hoping at some point William will be able to give us a demo of his unit. We might be able to figure out how to see what the color palette is, but I'm not necessarily going to be able to show you that today. But anyway, the first thing I'm going to do is rip these PALs out and put in William's ones and just see what it does. I don't think it's going to do anything useful, but we'll have a look. Right, let's give this a go. Ugh. God, that doesn't look right. So the text is white, but sort of yellow. Oh, I see what's going on. So, yeah, we've got white text, but there's a delayed yellow chrominance being overlaid on the top of it. I wonder why it's delayed. I'm not sure why that would even be. Yeah, that's not right. I mean, the data in the PROMs is the same for all colors, so it should be showing up as white. Now down in the bottom box there, I've actually activated a mystery logo which appears in the original PROMs, which I think is some kind of trade show demo. I've only ever seen 1/3 of it, so that's white or yellow rectangle in this case. I wonder if that might be part of some kind of color sequence, but yeah, I don't know, because I say I've only got one of the colors for it. So later on, I'm hoping we can see what that actually is. What I might do is I'm just going to activate the color bar sequence, which I actually programmed into these PROMs myself. Let's see what that looks like through these PALs. Oh yeah, no, that's complete bollocks. That's supposed to be the EBU color bars, but it's completely wrong. Now I wonder if these are actually outputting an RGB signal, which we're then trying to shove into a YUV PAL encoder. Maybe, I'm not sure, but yeah, they're clearly not much use, unfortunately. Next up, let's swap over the vertical controller PAL. This one was pretty straightforward from memory. Just that one there. Oh dear. Well, that doesn't work. Well, clearly the original vertical PAL is not compatible with my implementation. I have no idea what's going on there. I love the way there's just one square inside the bottom box. By the way, that's roughly what it looks like when you don't have a logo generator, but normally you'd turn off the clock cutouts. I don't know what's going on there. Right, so let's put my version of this one back in until we're ready to swap out the main microcontroller firmware, which we are not just yet. So put that one back in. And next up, we're going to swap out the horizontal controller. From memory, this one was pretty straightforward, but I remember a lot of profanities getting it to build. There's that one there. Yes! My firmware is compatible with the original horizontal PAL. Finally, a win. So next up, this one down here, which is, this is just a general glue logic PAL for the CPU, and also the timecode decoder is implemented in there, or part of it anyway. Now I didn't actually ever get around to implementing the timecode bit. Part of the reason was because trying to figure out what to do in this power was rather difficult. So yeah, I don't have to bother with that anymore. So let's give that a go. Yes, it works. So the glue logic power, also good. Brilliant. So we established that the original code is of no use for the color encoding piece, so we'll take those out, and we're just going to go back to the recreation. And the next thing we're going to have a look at is the character PROMs. Now, a quick recap on what the deal with these is. We got a copy of the green PROM for this board from DK Technologies. They just happened to have it. That was very lucky, but they didn't have the blue or red, and there wasn't any need for them to have it because they only needed the green one to generate the character PROMs for the newer generators, which are all monochrome, so yeah, don't need those. So I was always curious to know what was actually in the blue and reds of the originals. Now these ones here are not the originals, these are copies of the green. And what I basically did was inserted a color bar sequence into all three of them so I could test the color encoding circuitry. And there was another little color demo in there, which I probably put up on my other channel at some point. So yeah, I'm particularly interested to see what was in the other two, because from looking at the green one, I can see that one of the logos, it looks like it has maybe a color bar sequence in it, but because I've only got one of them, I wasn't sure what the rest of it looks like. So yeah, this is going to be pretty interesting to have a look at these. Hey, look at that. So that mystery logo, which I suspected had a color bar sequence in it, does have a color bar sequence. Oh, it's so good to finally see this. Literally for 3 years I've wondered what that actually looks like. And also look at the clock. The text has gone blue. What the hell? Now actually casting my mind back to when I did the recreation, one of the things I noticed was that the characters for the clock actually appear in the PROMs twice. And I wasn't even sure why that is. So now my recreation, it actually uses the second set of characters to display the clock. So that's probably why there's two in there. They've actually put another set in, maybe for some kind of demo to show that, hey, you can have the clock in a different color if you want to. Interesting. I never really thought of that. I thought they did that so you could maybe have some alternate characters or something. Like, yeah, okay. But looking at the color bar sequence there, it's actually, the colors are not in the same order as they appear at the top of the circle. So I wonder if that's actually correct. I wonder if my pals are actually doing the color encoding correctly. Possibly not. But the Philips text in the top box is white. So yeah, it's definitely looking a lot better than it was before. Well, I'm thinking maybe we just swapsy these character PROMs around and see if we can come up with something that looks a bit more sensible. Now that is looking better. So what I've been doing over the past half an hour or so is checking the implementation of my color-coded pals. Now it turns out I hadn't numbered the colors the same way as the spectrum. Now they're numbered the same way as the spectrum, and now that's looking better. So that sequence of color bars in the PTV logo there is the same as the EBU color bars. And I reckon that's what it's supposed to look like, because the color bars are sacred to these guys. They used to print them on the front of their manuals for about a decade or so, so that has to be what that is. I'm going to call this the Rosetta Stone, certainly in terms of the color translation. Now notice that the text in the clock is appearing yellow, and I think that's also a more sensible demo for text, because the color yellow is well represented in terms of bandwidth for composite video signals, whereas blue isn't so much. So yeah, I reckon this feels a bit more sensible. Now with this, what I'm going to do is go over and activate some of the other logos which appear in the PROMs. Look at that, the Philips logo. So it's actually got some color in it. Interesting. So for those people who watched my demo on my other channel, that appeared in monochrome, and I've seen a picture of this in a magazine, but the magazine was monochrome, so I wouldn't have been able to make out that blue in it. That's really interesting. Let's try the other one. So there's another one there. Now it's got yellow text in on a blue background. Now that's possibly for a different aspect ratio. That's probably the 4:3 generator, that one. So yeah, that's quite interesting. And I suppose those colors, they make sense because blue as a background is okay. It's pretty close to black, and yellow, as I said, is well represented in terms of bandwidth, so you're going to see the details. Now, I think at the time this was made, Philips weren't using any colors in their logos, so they would have just made up whatever. And yeah, if you colored the text in blue, which is their current logo, it wouldn't work because the blue is so poorly represented in terms of bandwidth, it would just be a smudge. So I reckon there's a fairly good chance that's what that is supposed to look like. But I say for the 16:9 version, which is that's the correct one there. That's how it might have looked when it was demonstrated back in trade shows. Now, for any of my viewers, if any of you guys were actually at IBC or NAB back, those trade shows back in the days, and you actually saw these guys demonstrating this thing, I'd be interested to hear from you. So now for the big moment. It's time to finally dispatch with my firmware and going back to the original. I've waited 3, maybe 4 years for this moment. It's just really exciting to finally be here. Yeah, it's not lost on me how ludicrous this whole saga is. It's just a damn test pattern generator, but the harder something is to find, the harder it is to get, the more that you want it. Now we're also going to take out this PAL here because we established that mine is not compatible. So let's get rid of that and put in this guy here and try it out. Alright, here we go. Now this is a big moment because I'm only aware of 2 people who have surviving samples of this. One guy, as I said, doesn't want to show us it, and the other, Williams ones, I'm told they don't actually work at the moment. He's actually trying to repair them right now. So this is definitely a first on YouTube, a fully functioning 5644. My hand is almost trembling here. Let's switch it on. Oh, look at that. So we've got a clock, time and date, and it's correct. So we are actually now the next day. But we've got no station ID text, which I'm not surprised about because, as if the real firmware would store it the same way in the NVRAM as mine. So yeah, at this point I have to confess I don't actually know how to operate the original firmware, so we're just going to go on what I know from the reverse engineering efforts because, as I've said many times, we don't have a manual for this thing. Now to get into the configuration mode is this button over here. Now these are all indicating the various modes that we can go into. Now one I believed was to set the time and date, so actually just the date. So I'll push these buttons. Yep, that's changing the day as I would expect. That's the month and that's the year. So let's exit from that and go to this, which should be the time. Yep. Same as the recreation, so yeah, that's cool. Right, let's get out of there. Now the next one I want to look at was button number 8, which is, from memory, this is to configure the time and date. Oh look, that's interesting. So we've got a different display on the screen, which I don't have in the recreation. So it appears to be telling us, I assume, how it's configured. So yeah, that's what's actually visible. This one, button number 3, is, yeah, that's the date format. Yeah, it's actually telling us what it's going to display, whereas I just juggle the numbers around, which is not very helpful. And this one is 12 or 24 hours. So yeah, I did correctly figure that out in the recreation. So yeah, that's good. And oh, you can actually change it from AM to PM. And I think I also got that one right too. So yeah, that's cool. Right, let's get out of that mode. Now the next mode is going to be text entry, which is button number 9. Now I think this is going to be quite different to my own version of it. Now, I'm trying to remember what the deal is. So I think button 3 was enter new character on the recreation, and 1 and 2 was, yeah. So this is actually the same. Button 1 is previous character, 2 is next character. So that's actually behaving the same way, which is that's good. So I should be able to enter another one. Yep. And notice that there's a cursor. Now I have a cursor in mine too, but the cursor blinks, so theirs doesn't blink. So I'm actually really surprised how close I was there. Right. Now next, what do I want to look at next? I'd like to know how to get to the bottom box. How do I do that? I think in my recreation it was button 8 goes to the bottom box. No, that doesn't. This one just deletes all the text. Huh. So yeah, we've already got a big difference there. How do I get to the bottom box? What about if I push 9? Oh, but now I've lost the text in the top box, but I can enter text down here. Okay, so we've got some text. So if I exit, I've lost it. Okay. Now they must have. There's another difference. When in my recreation, when you exit, it just saves it. There must be a button here which saves the text. Let's try this again. Could it be, what have we not tried? 4 is a bit of a mystery, so this is a toggle. I don't actually know what the point of this button is. In my recreation, this button here toggles between entering logos and text, but yeah, that clearly doesn't do that in this one. So I don't know what that's for. So what was I trying to do? Trying to save. Maybe it's button number 5 is the save button. Yes, so 5 is save. Now I don't know if that's really necessary, but yeah, I suppose it's nice. So what am I trying to do? I want to figure out what this button 4 does. Okay, let's put some text in here. It just seems to have no effect on it. Okay, let's put some text in. So that's on. If I press save, exit, nothing. I don't know. So if that's, okay, let's try again. Ah, now it's off. That's interesting. I've not seen this before. And the text is off. So if I push save, exit. Ah, the text has disappeared. So is this for actually turning the text off and on? So I push it now. Ah, my text is back. And if I push save, yeah, that's what it's for. So the button 4, this button which I use for toggling between text and logo entry, in the original firmware, it's actually just a text on, text off control. Which, yeah, of course it is, because all the other generators have that option in some way or other. Well, not the really old ones, but certainly the software-driven ones. So yeah, that's interesting. So I think we have we gone through all the controls now? I think we have. And it's actually the control of the original is probably a bit simpler than mine actually. But what I haven't seen is any way to enter logos or anything. So if I go through all the characters here, they've got the full set with all the accented characters, but I'm not seeing, like my recreation you can enter the PTV logo into the top box using this mode, but I haven't seen that pop up here yet. Let's just scroll through them all. See if that pops up. No, it doesn't, so they don't allow the entry of that, but yeah, okay. Interesting. Right, and to get a space, yeah, you just go below the character A to get a space. Alright, so the text editor, as I expected, is definitely quite different to my implementation, but I wouldn't say fundamentally different. And we've still got a mystery as to how logos are entered. There doesn't appear to be any way to enter logos from the front panel, so that must have to be done through the GPIB interface, and I do have some clues how that might work. But you know, let's just chuck some text in the bottom box, just so we got something. Save, then exit. So next up, we're going to try and activate some logos. Now, as we saw, we can't do it from the front panel, at least not as far as I can see. Now, when I was reverse engineering the firmware in the main CPU, I noticed there was a command in there called demo logo. It would be interesting to know whether or not that appears in the manual or not. What I found is it takes a parameter from 0 to 15. So what we're going to do is send that command into the unit with all the different possibilities and see what it does. And I think this might be how we get a logo out of it. Right, so just in the normal running mode now, I'm just going to go over and try one out. So the first one I'm going to set is 0. Oh, that's pretty cool. So that is, what's going on here? So, how is it doing that? Ah, so that's that PTV logo we saw with the stripes. I don't actually think that's a logo at all. That's possibly the stripes are what it's using to render this color bar display. This must be how they calibrate the logo generator in the factory. I reckon what they do is they put the logo generator into a special 5644 which just generates a black test card. Then they hook it up to a vector scope, and that's how they calibrate the logo generator. Oh, that's so interesting, because I was never quite sure how to do that. I was doing it by measuring the voltages at the output, but this is a much better way of doing it. All right, let's try out the demo logo 1. Is just setting the text to Philips PM5644 16:9, which I've seen it demonstrated like this in a number of magazines, and it also appears like that in the 1992 catalogue, so that's cool. Option 2, well, that's just taken us back to what I had programmed. Option 3, just some letters and numbers. Right, let's try number 4. Yeah, just more text and what have you. Option 5. Ah, there it is. So we have a logo, a demonstration logo. Now this is the one, and I've seen it pictured like this in a magazine, but as I said, it was monochrome, so I didn't know that it looked like that. Right, let's try number 6. Ah, blinking text. Very nice. Brings back rather fond memories of Web 1.0. Oh, look at that, another Web 1.0 blast from the past, marquee text. Now this is also interesting. Now when I was doing the recreation, I noticed that the horizontal controller had the ability to precisely position the text, but I wasn't sure what that was used for. Now that's what they use it for, the marquee, and I don't actually use it in the recreation, but it did implement it in the logic. So yeah, that's interesting. I've never seen any recordings of it moving like that on air. Right, let's try number 8. Ah, that's interesting. So we've got Philips color pattern generator, 644 16:9, ... by the looks of it. And I reckon that probably has to be used with a special test card where there's a black stripe across that area, because yeah, that's not really right to be laying white on white, because it would have 2 volts at the output, whereas white's supposed to be 1 volt. Right, let's try number 9. Oh, another marquee, look at that. New from Philips, color pattern generator, PM5644 16:9. Yeah, once again, I think that probably would have to be used with a special test card. Yeah, so this would be correct if it was 1992. Let's try number 10. Text 10, 11, 12. Yeah, it's just giving me text than the number that I'm entering into that command. So I think we've used up all of the possibilities here, and this will be text 15. Yeah, that's it. There's no more options. Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, it's cool that we got the widescreen firmware, because clearly it did have a little present in there for us, and how it makes me wonder what's in the 4x3 firmware. That must be, it clearly can't be the same as this. So yeah, this has been really cool, really interesting to see that. And I say I doubt this probably isn't necessarily documented in the manual. It's not something a customer is supposed to find. So yeah, that's really cool. Now next up, one of the original mysteries about this thing. What is this timecode input used for? When I first received this, I reached out to some other owners of these things, and I found that they were just as baffled as me. They didn't have any documentation either. We didn't even know the logo generator existed back then. Now at the time, we actually contacted the Danish Pro Television, who responded to us, and what they told us is that yes, they remember this product, however they don't own it anymore. It was owned by the original foreign-owned Pro Television, which they are not, and that was eventually sold to a Canadian competitor who basically shredded the company. So officially there's no surviving information about it. But now, of course, we have a logo generator. Now we know that the timecode input is connected to it, so we can actually try it out. Now I think most people watching this are already going to know this, but timecode is carried as an audio signal. So I've just got this converter box here, which is going to go from unbalanced to balanced. Now if you're not familiar, this is what timecode actually sounds like. So we're going to be pumping that racket into the back of the 5644, and it should just pick up the time, which is encoded into that signal. Straight away, look at that. So yeah, now we've got the correct time in there, and it's now synchronized to my timecode signal, which I'm just generating from my computer. I don't have an actual timecode generator. So yeah, there it is. Really nice. Next up, another interesting viewer contribution. This board here was loaned to me by Luca from Croatia. He actually posted this to me, which is very generous. So what is it? Well, if the camera will focus, we can see that it is an RS-232 interface. And this is an interface module for Philips generators. Now this is another thing that I've been looking for a long time, and it turns out to be even rarer than the logo generator. But it's quite a desirable option because you know, for anybody who's worked with GPIB, yeah, it's a cumbersome, expensive interface to work with. It's not really very convenient, and people who have contacted me about cloning these interface boards, this is the one people seem to want. So a quick bit of background on the actual cloning. What you typically get with these instruments, if you get a remote control interface, and these things are very, very common. This is a PM9191. You can see that it's actually made in Holland, so it's not specific to TV equipment. This can be found in a range of Philips instrumentation as a remote control option. So some time ago I looked at cloning this because I don't actually have many of these either, and I'd like to have some more of them. It looks like the kind of thing that would be easy to clone, except it isn't, and I will show you why that is. So if we look under the cover here, it looks simple, looks straightforward. However, this microcontroller here, unfortunately, this is a mask ROM variety. Now, what it actually is, this is an Intel MCS48 architecture. This is the 8021. But now the 8021 is just the 28-pin version, which is mask ROM only. It has no programming interface on it, so you can't read out the code. The Philips special sauce in this application is that it has an I2C controller, which of course the Intel one does not have. So yeah, that's a dead end. Now at that point I kind of gave up on it. Maybe we could reverse engineer it and re-engineer it from scratch, but I can't be bothered. I didn't really want it that badly. Now sometime later I came across this, which is the same thing, but where this one feels quite kind of cheap and nasty, double-sided PCB, just feels really cheap. This is like really nice quality, and it appears to be doing the same thing. If we look on the EEPROM here, and also on the back of the PCB, we see the number 4008. So this means that it's Danish, which is interesting. So they actually redesigned this at some point. Now I actually found out why that is. It's because of this thing here. Would have eventually become a Fluke product when the instrumentation division was sold off to Fluke, and whereas the TV equipment was held with Philips for a further 6 years. So that would have led to an awkward situation where Philips is buying proprietary parts off Fluke, so yeah, that's not very desirable. So that's how this, I assume that's how this came about, and it was designed the exact same year that that transaction took place. But what's interesting about it, look at this, we have an EEPROM on here, whereas the other one has a mask ROM microcontroller. So let me just take a minute to whip that off there, and I'll show you what's actually underneath. Actually, let me use this one here. So what this is actually a piggyback version of the microcontroller which appears on the original Dutch version, which is pretty cool. Not sure why they had to do that. Maybe they couldn't get the mask programmed versions, but they've clearly managed to get their hands on the code for it, so they can actually put it in an EEPROM. So that sort of opened up the possibility of cloning these interfaces. Unfortunately, there was a slight problem in that these piggyback microcontrollers are rare, precious items which are very rarely seen outside of an R&D setting. They're very expensive. But for Danish equipment, which was sold for 5-digit price tags, $30–40 for a microcontroller, who cares? So they obviously weren't too worried about that. And in terms of actually acquiring samples of this, they do come up on eBay from time to time, but unfortunately chip collectors bid them into the stratosphere to the point where it's not economical to acquire some of those. So I came up with a different solution. Now this is one of the ones I cloned, and it is actually an exact copy of this one here, which is PM8547 is the code assigned to that one. Whereas this one here is, what was that? PM9191. But to get around the lack of piggyback microcontroller problem, I designed up this little PCB here which plugs into the socket which the microcontroller would normally go into. And it's using a rather unusual chip here. This is the same thing as the piggyback version. It's the same chip, but it's a surface mount item, and it has the socket for the interface for the socket is a bunch of extra pins, so you can design a little board like this, and these are cheap and plentiful. So that enabled me to clone the GPIB interface. So I built one of these, but I'm not really sure if I would want to build it anymore, because this was a pretty expensive thing to make. It's got a whole lot of obscure interface chips on it, which ended up costing me a lot of money. And on top of that, all you get for that is a GPIB interface, which I personally don't even really want myself. I'd rather have the RS-232 version, but we would need to have the code. Now, from documentation, we know that there was also a Danish version of the RS-232 interface. No sample of that has ever materialized that I know of. However, this here is what I was donated, well not donated, loaned. I do have to send it back. Now this one contains the EEPROM for the RS-232 interface, so we can dump that. It's actually designed for the newer generators, the ones with the LCD panel on the front panel, but it's the same circuit as the other one, so that does allow that one to be cloned, and we do have the PCB files for the version of it in this form factor here. So yes, it's now finally possible to recreate the RS-232 interface. I haven't done it yet, but I'll get around to it at some point. And for those people who ask me about it, I'll get in touch with you guys over Discord or email or however you reach out when that's finished, if I ever get around to it, which I do plan to. So yeah, anyway, thanks to Luca for loaning this, and that was really cool to finally see one of these things. Very, very, very rare item, and I don't know why they're so rare. Like, why on earth is it so hard to find one with an RS-232 interface? They're all GPIB. I mean, GPIB is just a pain in the ass to work with, so I don't understand why this is so scarce. Well, that's all for this video. Is this the last one that I'm going to make about this product? I have no idea. It all depends on how popular this one is. If it turns out to be a complete flop, I probably won't do another one unless there's something really, really amazing turns up. But nonetheless, I'll always be wanting to collect code dumps, and I'll always be wanting to hear from people who've got samples of it, any interesting models of it. Now, as I said back in the first video, I suspect that there's probably 100 or so variations of it that were made or told. Now, most of those are custom models, which are lost forever, we'll never see them again. However, if you have any sample of it, of course get in touch with me, particularly if it's one that I'm not aware of. And of course, particularly if it's got one that a logo generated, because there's a lot of SKUs of that thing which still need to be dumped, and presently we've only got one of them. But anyway, that is all for today's video, and thanks for watching.